What I started with last week was it's a part one, part two. Every one of these messages. The first one is invitation. The next one is challenged. And last week we talked about the woman at the well. For those of you who weren't here, her story is quite simple. This is a woman who was shunned by her community. She had kind of a sordid past, and we'll talk about that a little more today. She was a Samaritan, which by Jews were not seen as good people. She was a woman. In those days, women weren't held in high regard. And so she just had all these things going against her. And because of her lifestyle choices, that's a good way to say it, she was also pushed away for that. And now she meets Jesus. Not only does Jesus talk to her at a place where no one else was talking to her, but Jesus, that is very nice. Jesus meets her and transforms her, gives her a new identity, gives her new security, and gives her new hope. And so here's what happens next. We don't know. And so I'm going to preach a whole message to you this morning about something I don't know. But I think there's some things and pieces that we can put together about this woman. Because what happens is that after she meets with Jesus and she sees that she's accepted, she sees that she belongs, she now goes to everyone and says, come meet this man who has changed my life, who's told me everything about me. And so that's what happens next. And so what we see here is that Jesus invites her to drink of this living water. This water where his spirit fills her. So she's not thirsty again. She has a spiritual thirst, a spiritual hunger. And Jesus says, now I've come to give you living water to overflowing. To overflowing. And so now that she's encountered and accepted this living water, now the question is what next? Now here's the thing. We can only speculate. But there are some things we kind of know here. Okay? For example, in those days, if you were in a situation where you were shunned by everyone else in the community, it wasn't like you could get on a plane and go to Florida or, I don't know, to Hawaii, right? I'm trying to think of places you'd all like to go. I don't know if that's true. You couldn't escape it. So we're pretty certain that this woman had to go back to the life she knew. But it's different. She's different. Okay? And that's what I want you to see. Because now these next steps is now she's got to deal with her past and she's got to live and look forward to her future. And so here's the thing, is that the first thing we need to see as this woman moves forward now is that if she is to move forward, she has to reject the defining power of the past. Right? Every person here has a past. Some of those things we're not very proud of. But in every situation, that past does not have to define us. Okay? It's the difference between wounds and scars. Do you know the difference? In other words, you've had hurtful things that have happened in your past, so have I. And when they're fresh, when they still hurt, that's a wound, right? But hopefully at some point they begin to heal. And so what's left is just merely a mark, right? You don't feel the pain anymore. You know it happened, but it no longer is constant. You cause constant troubles. And so for this woman, she is now at this place where she says, okay, the past can no longer define me. And she has to go back to a situation. Now, here's her situation. Jesus points out to her, in this conversation, he says, go and talk to your husband. And she says, but sir, I have no husband. He says, you're right. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're now living with is not your husband. Now you just think about that. That's a lot to deal with, right? I mean, if you've had 5 husbands, that's a lot of Christmas cards, okay? And so now she's got to go back. And by the way, when Jesus had this conversation, it wasn't like those 5 husbands just disappeared. It wasn't like that she went back and the guy she was living with, who's not her husband, just went away. I mean, maybe he did. We don't know. But I do know this, is that for her, that she was going to trade in her old life, her dead life, for a new life in Jesus. And so she had to deal with that past. She had to address it. Now I don't know how you would address that, right? And we could go through each and every situation here this morning. But I do know that for this woman, that where I really believe it begins is to forgive. To forgive those who hurt you. To exchange those wounds for scars. The Bible says this in Matthew chapter 6, if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive you. And so let me just say, as this is what I would call a challenge week, right? Here's the reality here. Forgiveness is not an option. Let me just say that again. Forgiveness is not an option. And that sounds really rough because some of you say, yeah, but you don't know what so-and-so did to me. You don't know what they said to me. You don't know how they hurt me. You don't know how they ruined me. And you're right, I don't. But I've got my own stuff too. And I've had people who have hurt me terribly, and I just know that for me, that I just knew that God was saying to me that at some point I was going to have to forgive them, and that's been a hard process in some cases. For you, it may seem like an impossible process. But let me just tell you what forgiveness is and what forgiveness is not, okay? Because I think the thing is that a lot of us think that if I forgive someone, that means that I say that everything was okay. And that's not the case. I had a woman who came to our church, and she's not here, and she's given me permission to share this. Her husband had cheated on her, left her for another woman, started a new life, and left her and her 2 kids kind of on their own. And about a month after that happened, he said, you know what? I think we just all need to be good friends. Let's hang out. And she came to me and she says, do I have to do that? And I said, no, right? Okay, the answer is no, right? Okay, so because here's the thing is that it's not like we say, oh, it's okay, everything's fine, so it's not excusing, it's not forgetting, and in some cases you may not even be able to reconcile. Okay? Now, I hope that you can reconcile in certain situations, but there's some that you just might not be able to because that person is not safe for you. But here's the thing. If we hold on to that unforgiveness, if we just spend the rest of our life just wishing them to go to hell in a handbag, and you know you've done it, okay? I know, that's sometimes been my only comfort. Okay, they wronged me, but at least I'm really certain they're going straight to hell. And that's not necessarily the case. These are people who are probably going to be in heaven with you. Now what are you going to do? You can't avoid them in heaven, okay? And so as I look at this, I realize that when I forgive, I choose not to hold on to that hurt that was done to me, to not let it define me, to not spend my waking days wishing them harm. I had one man who was a friend, and these things usually happen with friends, right? Who did some pretty horrific things to me. And I did. I can tell you, I went through that process of really wishing them gone, really gone, to a place where when I saw them, I didn't freeze up, because I remember the first time I ran into them after all this happened. I just kind of, just tightened. To a place where I saw him, I didn't do that. And then as it went a little further, I started thinking about the good things that we had shared. And after that, I was involved in a ministry opportunity in which they were participating as well. And I was grateful for that. And I thought of that transition that happened only by God's help, and I was so grateful that no longer defined me and held me prisoner. Now, I don't know if we're ever going to be buddy-buddy again, to be honest. I don't think he's going to invite me to his birthday party. But at the same hand, I'm okay. And what I want to say to you here is that every person in this room has a situation at some point that they are going to have to show forgiveness. And here's the other part of that, is that's what God requires. God requires that because in doing so, he sets you free. And so forgiveness is giving up the right to hurt another person back. It's seeing the person, not just the hurt. It's being able to wish someone well. Forgiveness makes possible the healing of a broken relationship, the reestablishment of community, but most importantly, forgiveness brings about the healing of us. why does God command us to forgive? Because it's the best way to live. And because Jesus has forgiven me. That's always the trump card here, right? John Ortberg had this to say. He said, to refuse to forgive means I allow the one who hurt me to keep me chained in a prison of bitterness and resentment year after year. No human beings are more miserable than the unforgiving. I think about that. And so I just know that for this woman to move forward, she can't let the past define her. And there was a lot of hurt, I'm sure, with 5 failed marriages. Okay, 5. There was probably a lot of hurt with the relationship that she was in now. Now, I don't know if she broke off that relationship. I don't know if that person she was living with came to know Jesus as well. I don't know. But I know that she had to deal with that, and in a way that was not just the same old, right? And Sandy's doing the same thing again and again, expecting a different result, that she had to start with something new here. And so right now, the first thing I want you to see when it comes to being a person who is changed by Jesus, that we have these religious encounters, right? I mean, you've had it. You've been to the church service or the Christian concert or heard the message or prayed with someone or been to one of our worship nights or, I mean, the list goes on, and you have this incredible moment with Jesus, and then now you have to go back to your home. You have to go home to your messy spouse and your messy house and your messy bills and your messy life. And you go, well, that's not the way I pictured it. I thought I would just go home and, abracadabra, it's all better, right? And you got to work through that. And yet, here's the thing, is I don't believe that woman went back and wallowed in unforgiveness and wallowed in how people saw her. Because her life now was defined by Jesus. How Jesus saw her. And what Jesus called her up to, he called her up, not out. And so I think that began the process of then filling the hole in her soul. Because before that, how she filled the hole in her soul was just with men, right? Now here's the thing. Every one of us has unhealthy things that we fill the hole in our soul with, right? I was going to say, let's shout that out in the count of 3, but I don't think we're going to. And then no one came back, right? So I will tell you that when I am in an unhealthy place, I will tell you personally things I feel safe telling you about first. But I've got 3 vices. I'm sure there are many more. Now you're only time you're paying attention. I go to Guadalajara Grill. That is my comfort food place. That's my happy place. Okay, so it's food, it's chocolate. These things all tend to go right here. And I watch either Hallmark movies or America's Got Talent. I'm ashamed to tell you that, because it's my happy place, right? They sing and they get the golden buzzer and everyone's happy and it's all good, right? And just so you know, I don't know if that's really healthy in the long run. It's a good quick fix. I don't know if it's really healthy. But I do know this, is that for this woman, when Jesus saw her and he called her to this new life, he called her to something that you don't expect. He didn't say, you know what I think you need to do? I think you need to go to Guadalajara Grill. Now, by the way, if you ever see me in Guadalajara Grill, don't just walk by and go, oh man, he's off the wagon, right? Okay, no. I go there. I'm meeting a friend there this week, and there's nothing wrong, just so you know. But and then the next week I've got someone else lined up there. And the next week, but I don't think Jesus said that. I think, but what he did say is this, and I know this from the story. He just said, I want you to worship. I want you to worship in spirit and in truth. And in other words, Jesus says, I want you to fill your life with things that glorify God, because otherwise the hole in your soul, right, is going to be filled with things that do not glorify God. Paul said it this way in Philippians, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you've learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. You see, there's a purpose, there's a health, there is something now that fills the hole in our soul that is of God. I mean, I find like in this church, I find that the people, I'm always amazed when I see people who then start coming to this church and then take it to the next level. They start volunteering, right? Some volunteer with children's ministries. Some volunteer with youth. And by the way, we still need volunteers in both those areas, by the way. Some are involved with setup and takedown. Some are involved in missions. And what happens is they start doing things that are not focused just solely on them, but to give glory to God. But Jesus starts off like, hey, first, start off this way. Start off by worshiping in spirit and truth. So I think one of his first parting place is to give yourself to worship. He says, God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. Spirit means not just words and thoughts or mere emotion, but with one's innermost self, at one's center, one's heart. And such worship engages mind, emotions, and body, but it's centered deeper. It's centered deeper. It's spirit and truth. And truth is one who really is. We worship in truth. No hypocrisy, no falseness, no deception. As one who is spiritually alive, living in the new reality Jesus offers.